Good afternoon, evening, morning, whenever you're listening to the podcast. We're so delighted that you're back. And I have to tell you, I'm delighted with our two guests today, the mighty Angelos, who aren't just a husband and wife team, but they're a marine science team, and they're doing just remarkable and exciting work. You know, as we move towards fleshing out our concept of a falcon's journey, one of the things that is really even increasingly important are these signature academic or artistic or athletic or community service opportunities that we have. And so marine science is obviously a flagship program for us. And so today's goal is to spotlight it further. So welcome. We're glad you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we dive in, yes, pun intended, to talk about marine science at St. Stephen's, could you just share with the listeners a little bit about your background? You know, what did you do prior to coming to St. Stephen's? What brought you here? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, so after graduating college, I went to Rutgers in New Jersey and got my degree in marine science and minored in science education. And my first opportunity was an internship with Mote Marine Laboratory in Sarasota. And I started with their education program and I started helping them with school groups, summer camps. And then I was hired on with them part-time in the education department where I developed curriculum and helped lead summer camp and lead school groups, and used the science and the data that Mote scientists were doing to develop school programs. And one of my contacts from Mote knew one of the contacts here at St. Stephen's, which was Anne-Marie Shields, was our science department chair, and she told her about the opportunity at St. Stephen's to come and teach science. And that's what brought me to St. Stephen's, was that connection.
Good recruiting effort there.
Yeah.
Mr. Angelo, how about you?
Yeah, so I graduated from the University of South Florida, and I had a lot of great internships in college and just outside of college, working with the Turtle Research Group with UCF, as well as working at the smoke larval development at the Marine Aquaculture Park at Mote Marine Laboratory. And so I really developed a love for the ocean through working through these different internships. And I also worked at Mote Marine Laboratory as an aquarium biologist, working with jellyfish and corals. I also became a senior aquarium biologist by working with the stony coral tissue loss disease with our Atlantic corals on the Florida Reef Track. It was a really great opportunity to do conservation work as well as leading a team of people that we haven't been able to work with these species very much in captivity. And it was a great opportunity for me to do that. Well, in the year 2020, our seventh grade science teacher was retiring, and my wonderful wife had mentioned that there was a job opening that I should consider taking it. And it only took about 2 months of her badgering me about it to say, hey, why don't you try this out and let's see what would happen. And I interviewed that May, and the rest is history. I worked in the middle school from 2020 until last year, where I taught earth and life sciences, and it was a dream come true because I got to teach science to a lot of really curious and very excited seventh grade human beings.
No, that's awesome. And we're so glad we pried you out of Mote to come here, and especially taking you away from the turtle and the snook labs. You know, I think that shows the draw of the falcon. So let's stay with you, Mr. Angelo, because one of the things I think a lot of people don't understand is that our marine science program starts well before students get to upper school, and they have a chance to learn quite a bit of information prior to then. I know you didn't teach in the lower school. That's Mrs. Heron who does a lot of this, but can you just speak a little bit to how we introduce them at the lower levels and then, if you will, hand them off to determine where they want to go into further depth in the upper school?
So for the middle school, we have a I-Pillar program called the Marine Science I-Pillar, in which Dr. Supernan, myself, and now Mr. Skett, who has replaced me in the middle school, do different classes talking about specifically Arctic habitats, because that is where Dr. Supernan's specialty is in Arctic zones. And they teach kids about different types of climates. And in the lower school, Mrs. Heron does a lot of um, prep for these kids as well, which Mrs. Angel can talk further to.
Yeah, so Mrs. Heron in the lower school incorporates marine science into every single grade, all the way from pre-K 3 in our fledglings, all the way through the lower and intermediate school grades. They also use our dock, which is on the McLewis Bayou, where they get to go down and do observations. They do labs and experiments. Some examples of how they incorporate marine science into the lower school grades would be in kindergarten, I'll say, because kindergarten is the grade that our son Drew is in. In kindergarten, they focus on freshwater versus saltwater habitats. And within that, they talk about then learning about seashells and about different types of marine invertebrates, where they do a study classifying bivalves, which are animals that have two shells, like clams and oysters, versus univalves, which have one shell, like snails. And so she incorporates marine science through every single grade level in all different ways, focusing a lot on different habitats, especially our Florida habitats.
Wow. So let's turn to the upper schooler now. For this year, for the first time, both of you are teaching. And Mrs. Angelo, let's again stay with you. You were appointed the Marine Science Coordinator role this year. Could you talk a little bit about that role, and then even more about this distinction that our students in the upper school can get in marine science? What goes into that? What classes do they take, or do they do project work?
Yeah, so in the upper school, our students have the opportunity to take 3 full years of marine science. So after they've completed biology their freshman year, they can take Marine Science 1 as a sophomore, which focuses on our larger ecosystems. They can take Marine Science 2 their junior year, which is a focused marine biology class where they focus through different groups of organisms and their form and functions. And then in Marine 3, their senior year, is when they are focusing on their research projects. So they design their own research project through all of the marine science they've learned through their time at St. Stephen's. They're able to take all of that and come up with a question that they want to answer, that they're interested in. And they design a research project to answer that question. They collect data on that question all year. And then at the end, they present that information in a poster session into the upper school, and then they also produce a paper, a scientific paper on their research and study. And so students that have done all 3 years in the upper school of marine science are able to then graduate with our Ocean Academy distinction. Those students also, throughout their time, participate in multiple um, experiences outside of school, like field trips, opportunities to work with other organizations, marine science organizations in the community and in the state. And so they have a lot of hands-on experience. And then with that graduation distinction, it gives them such a great foundation to continue that type of environmental study in their future. As the marine science coordinator, it has become my job to oversee that process and make sure that our students are getting out of the program what they need to get out of it. And also coordinating all the field experiences, the field trips, and those other experiential learning pieces.
So it sounds like a lot of work, but a lot of fun too.
Yes.
This question's really for both of you. As you kind of look for the next decade of marine science at St. Stephen's, notice, by the way, I'm already keeping you on the hook for at least another 10 years. But how might the program continue to evolve and thrive?
So one of the ways that we hope to do that, actually many of the ways we hope to do that, is just by continuing to engage our students in really authentic marine science experiences, both in research and just in hands-on experiences.
And just to stop you for a second, what are some of the research projects that students maybe have done in the last few years?
So students have done projects looking at microplastic concentrations in our bayou. One student looked at how those concentrations change as you get closer to kind of more urbanized West Bradenton versus further out into the bayou. Students have done experiments looking at trash, the collection of marine debris in the bayou, and what makes up marine debris that is found there. Students have done, one student did a project last year looking at mangrove propagules and how different concentrations of sunscreen impact the growth of those propagules. We get a lot of students into our marine science program that are really interested in fishing. So we have students that will design projects looking at how different lures affect fishing or different tides and times of day impact fish catch. So a really wide range of different topics that they've conducted their research on.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. And last year I had the chance, as I do every year, to watch some of those presentations, and I actually now know what a propagule is. So I'm very proud of that.
And I think it's really interesting too to see when they start in Marine Science 1 and move all the way up through Marine Science 3, where they're choosing their own topic for their research, that the heart that these students have and the love that they have for the local environment that they live in, and showing that picture to others is really awesome because they are becoming better stewards. They are becoming more educated themselves, and it's their specific learning. We're there to help them get to that point.
Yeah.
And the students are just really driven to do some really great things.
So what's next? Where do you envision the next kind of steps potentially in the program, knowing that it's always in the process of becoming?
Yeah, of course. And so we want to just continue to build on the program, engage as many students in marine science as we possibly can, and provide them as many experiences as we can in the field. So, an example would be in marine science this year, the students have the opportunity to go on a trip with us to the Keys, where in that trip, they're going to get to engage in citizen science, where they're collecting data on this trip on the Florida coral reef that will help scientists track and manage and look at coral bleaching, which is such an important environmental issue, where they're learning how to collect data. They're learning how to follow a procedure. They're learning what that data means and why we collect it. So getting them as many of those authentic experiences as possible, I think, is really important.
Yeah, and what a connection again to that whole notion of Falcon's journey, where students identify something that's really important to them, and then they have the opportunity to drive whatever that project might look like. We live in a beach town, obviously, and a lot of our families' livelihoods are directly tied to the health of our aquatic systems, whether that's a developer or someone in tourism business, or even those whose job it is to keep our water sources and ecosystems safe. All that said, what do you say to someone who says, well, gosh, that seems like a lot of marine science your kids do? Do they actually learn biology or chemistry and physics? Yeah. What's the overlap? What does that look like?
Absolutely. I think marine science has this misnomer that it's all just about dolphins and cuddling marine animals, where really marine science encompasses every science. In our marine science classes, our kids do biology, chemistry, and physics in every year of marine science. So in Marine Science 1, for example, we focus on estuaries. And within estuaries, they also learn about what are the impacts of nutrient runoff in the bay and how do we measure salinity of water and why does it matter? What are the physical things that change the salinity of water, like the gravitational pull of the moon on the tides, and how does that impact the living organisms? So there is a lot of overlap, and it all connects together because everything in science is ultimately connected.
And that makes sense to me. I mean, that makes sense why Mrs. Heron is able to weave this into so many of her foundational lessons. Let's change it up a little bit and have a little fun and play a fill in the blank game. And I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Angelo. And I'll start with this question. If there were one thing that you hope that St. Stephen's students would take from the study of marine science, it would be
blank would be to love the ocean and have a better understanding and respect for the surroundings that you enjoy on a daily basis.
Mrs. Angelo, different question. One of the coolest things that you get to do as a marine science teacher is blank.
Take the kids on a boat into the Manatee River and get into the water with them. Get them hands-on, get them collecting animals, have them actually touching the animals and just getting that really deep appreciation for the water in their environment.
Well, and I have to tell you, we're taping this on Thursday afternoon, and my sidekick Dave Glazer's here, as he always is, and he went out just last week on one of those trips and put together a pretty neat video. So if you haven't had a chance to see it, I think we'll link it to this podcast and get a chance to look at it then. You've already touched a little bit on this, Mrs. Angelo, so I'm interested, Mr. Angelo, how you might respond. That one of the most misunderstood aspects of marine science, or maybe a common misnomer, is blank.
So it's all about training megafauna, and that we get to just swim with dolphins all day. I agree with her 100%. We both literally said it at the same time when we read that sentence. And it is so true because, it's more than just training. It's more than just understanding how big megafauna work. It is learning about all these different facets of what marine science is. Because, we just talked about how the hydrology, the atmosphere, the water, all and the land all interact together, and how these all play a role together in the same spot. And by being able to marry all of these different sciences together is so important for these kids to understand. It makes things fun for us as well because we get to dive deep, no pun intended with that, into going into different subjects, even if the kids may have a tangential questions that's not specifically with the lesson or the lab that we have, which I think Mrs. Angelo and I both get really excited about with these weird questions that the kids have, because they're so curious and they may have seen something that led them to ask that question, which allows for us to really get into a different side of our classes that is really exciting for us, which allows for us to be better for our students.
Yeah. You introduced a term that I don't know, and I think one of the things that you do well as both individuals and as co-teachers is you make pretty sophisticated things accessible to young people at every age. But what is megafauna?
Oh, megafauna is large, charismatic creatures. So like sharks and dolphins, otters, sea lions.
Got it.
And so forth.
Kind of like Mr. Cassane. All right, let's we'll move on. So let's keep with the humor a little bit, and let me ask you this question, and it's more of a personal question. It doesn't have to be about marine science, but what's one thing about you, Mrs. Angelo, that perhaps even your closest friends or colleagues may not know? It doesn't have to be any kind of deep, dark secret, but any special interests or talents or just things that you enjoy that maybe folks don't know about you?
Something most people don't know is that I grew up in a racing family. So, like, automobile racing was a huge part of my childhood and my family. We went to the racetrack racing almost every single weekend through my whole childhood. My dad raced and stopped after I was born because he didn't have as much time. But then my brother and I actually both raced, and we raced these small cars called quarter midgets that you age out of at 16. And one race, I actually finished second in the nation. So that's something most people don't know.
Yeah, that's neat. Marine biologist / race car driver. That's pretty good on the business card.
Yeah.
Mr. Angelo?
Well, I am a huge band geek. I love playing the tuba. I played it all through middle school, high school, and college. And whenever Miss Hambrick gives me the opportunity to, I always love playing with the students, as well as whenever we have anything that happens with a staff organization. I also like to play the keyboard, and I also play around with the ukulele. So it's a lot of fun.
Wow. So musician as well. So last question, and a really basic one, but a really important one. I hope, I certainly am, if those that are listening to this and say, whether it's for their child or whether it's a student listening to this, um, hey, where do I go find more about this? Because this is just a, 15, 20-minute snapshot. Where do I go? How do I find out more about what's going on in this field at St. Stephen's?
Yeah, I think the one of the best ways to get started is with the info on the website and then reaching out to one of us, whether by email or, by phone or in person. We love to talk about marine science, so we could sit and talk about it all day long. But then another way that's also really great is to reach out to students that have been in the program and gone through the program. One of our favorite things about our seniors in our program when they get up for their senior speeches is they talk about our marine science family, and it really becomes a very tight-knit group, and they can speak a lot to what they experience in the program, what they get to do, all of the fun experiences they've had. So I'd say either reaching out to one of us or reaching out to students that are in it or have been through it.
I love that. I love that. What a great place to end. And I just want to thank both of you, not only for your time today, but about all that you pour into get the pun there, you see what I did there, but all that you give to your students and to the school. I mean, it does not go unnoticed. And I'm certain that there are dozens and dozens and dozens of families listening to this whose children have truly been shaped by a lot of the work that you've done. So thanks for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.